Hello everyone, this is Victoria Green, back with another episode of Helpful History. Today we will be talking about badass Buddhists.
We're going to start with a short overview of the formation of the Buddhist movement with specific reference to the type of individuals who came together to form such a passionate organization. So specifically, the Buddhist crisis in South Vietnam emerged from a clash of modernizing visions as linked to the Buddhist revival, which was a nationalist reform movement that began in the early 20th century. Also, the course of the events that followed deemed the Buddhist movement overall. They were shaped by the personalities and agendas of the particular Buddhist government, leaders, and fierce rivalries among members of the Diem family, as we learned about. So as we will discuss in great depth, the May 8th incident was a prominent cause for further violent opposition to Buddhism, as well as protests and demonstrations by supporters of the Buddhist movement that followed. So specifically, on May 8th, there was a group of Buddhists who gathered in Hue to listen to a broadcast in recognition of Buddha's birth, also called the Wesak Day. However, when the radio failed to broadcast, the crowd tore down the flag of South Vietnam and replaced it with the international flag of Buddhism due to all the restlessness. After this, there was a group of South Vietnamese policemen who arrived, and they ultimately ended up killing 9 of the people in the crowd by shooting them. Again, this caused a series of consequences not only from Buddhist activists but also governmental forces. So to be specific, the government moved to crush protests with a series of midnight raids as well as mass arrests, which just further crystallized the opposition to Diem and the American government, as well as a high command for the South Vietnamese army. This led to a military coup on the 1st of November, which also led to the overthrow of Diem and his ultimate assassination. Finally, this was formed by a rapid evolution of the Buddhist movement into a broad-based popular uprising, which is highly unexplainable by many historians.
After the devastating events of the May 8th incident, Tri Quang used the Vietnamese Buddhist collective hatred for the government to create a non-violent and anti-government movement. To build support and legitimize the movement, Tri Quang, with the help of monks, created the Manifesto of the Vietnamese Buddhist Faithful. The first couple of demands focused on decreasing the ways Buddhism, and thereby Buddhists, were centered within Vietnam. Other demands centered around obtaining equal rights to Catholic missionary societies according to Ordinance 10, a South Vietnamese law that gave certain protocols and regulations to private associations and religious groups. South Vietnamese Buddhists felt that they were more scrutinized under Ordinance 10 than Christian-affiliated groups who had a separate oversight system written into the law. The monks wanted the same exemptions that applied to Catholics to apply to all Buddhist organizations. Overall, the most important of the demands, as according to Tri Quang, was securing the General Buddhist Association's ability to pursue its reform agenda and religious freedom. A key figure within Tri Quang's movement was Tam Chau, a General Buddhist Association chairman who had previous dealings with Catholics and Diem. Tam Chau built support for the movement in Saigon by convincing hesitant monks within the area to put their trust into the new movement. In addition, on May 9th, Chau issued a heart letter to all Buddhists throughout Vietnam. This letter portrayed the ever-present trend of anti-Buddhist violence within South Vietnam, while passionately calling all Buddhists to take action underneath the leadership of the General Buddhist Association. After Buddhist leaders met with Diem to discuss their demands, Chau and other representatives led the discussion feeling enraged by Diem's refusal to change his views or policies. In response, Tam Chau and other Buddhist leaders displayed the strength of the movement. On May 30th, 400 monks and nuns assembled on the traffic circle in front of the RVN National Assembly building. After 4 hours, the demonstrators moved to the association's headquarters at Loy Pagoda and began a 48-hour hunger strike. Afterward, on June 1st, large crowds gathered at pagodas throughout Hue. In response, local authorities cut off water and electricity to the pagodas. Later deploying officers and armored vehicles to the areas as well. These actions prompted the demonstrators to stay. In response to such crowds, on June 3rd, soldiers became violent, using tear gas against a crowd that gathered near to the pagoda. Several dozen people were hospitalized and others developed skin conditions. Buddhist leaders became even more upset, expanding their list of demands to include compensation for those injured. This was the first act of violence in the movement.
I'm Victoria. Victoria Green, here to continue our talk about the Buddhists in Vietnam. So Diem wanted to kind of assert his personal authority over the central region, and so as a result, he sent several loyalists to impose a truce over his brothers Thuk and Khan and Hugh. When he did this, he hoped that they would reduce tensions and that they would negotiate with the Buddhist leaders in Saigon. So he sent Zhao Qianheng, who was a southerner from the RVN National Police. So what he did was he ordered to contact the Buddhists and the leaders who disliked Tri Quang. So he ordered to investigate the Catholics also, who were close to Thuk, to find out if they wanted to kind of take power at the expense of the Buddhists as well and overthrow the government. So on June 4th, Diem appointed the Vice President Tho to lead the government commission that would meet with the committee and therefore continue his talks about the truce. Also included in this meeting were Interior Minister Bui Van Long and Presidency Nguyen Dinh Duan, who advised Diem initially to negotiate with the Buddhists. With these people, Diem seemed to be ready for a compromise with the Buddhists. Tho's commission held intense meetings with Tom Cho's Intersect Committee, and then the Buddhists, which were joined by Thich Thien Min, a monk from Hu, who was a trusted associate of Tri Quang, though not as trusted by the Buddhists because he allied with the government. They agreed and addressed all 5 of Buddhist demands and included a truce where Buddhists would stop protests and forces would withdraw from Hue. However, June 7th, the agreement was thrown into doubt. So now we're going to transition for our open letter to Ngo Dinh Diem. Dear Ngo Dinh Diem, let people express their religious beliefs and stop using others to push your ideologies. During the 1950s, you initially gave some high government and military positions to Buddhists to try to gain their support. However, the Catholic domination of the government bureaucracy remained, and the Buddhists therefore tried to complain of the efforts that forced conversion and resistance to their request for religious events. Then, 2 days before the Buddhist holiday, Vesak Day, celebration of life and death of Buddha himself, Diem, you issued a ban on all religious flags. Apparently, you were upset with the violation of a prior flag policy at Catholic celebrations of your brother Thuk's anniversary as Archbishop the previous week. Then, in 1962, policy said that all religious flags must be smaller and flown below the South Vietnamese national flag. The Catholic celebrations completely disregarded this. Your brother Ken then made a deal with the local Buddhists in Hue to look the other way. So Buddhists were very angry at the Vesak Day celebrations, perceiving the flag ban to be targeting them, rightfully. Buddhist Tri Quang used this opportunity to channel the people's anger at the Diem regime. The South Vietnam Army marched then into the celebration in Hue, and explosions and gunfire were heard. The government said it was communists, but Buddhists said it was the South Vietnamese army. 9 Buddhists were killed. Please, respect other people's religions, even if you don't want to follow them yourself, Mr. Dinh Diem. It'll make things easier for everyone, and you'll be more liked by your own people. Sincerely, the crew of Helpful History.
A leader who was supportive of pushing down the Buddhist movement through violent raids of pagodas and arrests of Buddhist leaders and protesters was Ngo Dinh Nhu. Ngo Dinh Diem early on supported negotiation as a strategy, but he later adopted similar attitudes as his brother. On June 16th, the joint communiqué was signed by Diem. This agreement was between the South Vietnamese government and Buddhist leaders. This failed to effectively end the conflict because Diem did little to satisfy Buddhist demands in the agreement. The continued retaliation of the police showed that distrust was still present. This distrust continued to increase after June 26th. On July 7th, an anti-communist leader, Deng Tam, committed suicide, seeking to send a similar message of protest as Quang Duc a month prior. These continued acts of protest and the government's lack of action towards the communiqué made leaders further distrust Diem. Among the leaders, Chi Quang was especially skeptical about the government's promises to negotiate. As the government began increasing forces against the movement, Tam Chao began asking the U.S. for support, as there were rumors about the police's intentions to strike the Sat Loi Pagoda. The government also created the scheme Operation Flood, which was dedicated to arresting influential Buddhist leaders to slow the movement. A key moment was August 18th, when Buddhist protests gathered in Hue and Saigon in a rally. Around 15,000 Buddhists gathered in protest at the Sat Loi Pagoda. This showed how powerful and widespread the Buddhist movement had become. These protests triggered the crackdown by the government. In this campaign, they detained 700 monks and nuns, raided the Satellite Pagoda, and overall the government took control of 12 pagodas in Saigon. The government control over pagodas was harmful for the movement because they acted as the centers for protest. Shortly after, Diem announced that martial law would be imposed. Ultimately, the movement was one of the most destabilizing forces for South Vietnam, as Diem's government became weak, allowing new influences from the north, which contributed to the U.S.'s decision to take Diem out of power. After the pagoda raids, an additional 5 monks self-immolated, contributing to the high tensions from the raids, arrests, and lack of compromise on the side of Diem's government. The Buddhist movement eventually ended when General Deng Văn Minh led a coup against Diem, which led to his assassination on November 1, 1963, backed by U.S. support. The result was more direct involvement of U.S. forces on the ground in South Vietnam to further their efforts of containing communism.